Welcome to Hearths of Myths. Tonight, the air carries the scent of damp earth and ancient pine. We are leaving the lowlands behind, moving away from the flickering lanterns of the village and the safety of the rice paddies. Our path leads upward, into the heart of the Japanese wilderness, where the mist clings to the jagged peaks like a living shroud. Can you hear the sound? It is not the wind, nor is it the cry of a common hawk. It is a sharp, resonant whistle that echoes through the cedar groves, a sound that has chilled the hearts of travelers for over 1,000 years. Close your eyes, settle into the warmth of your surroundings, and let the mountain silence speak. We are entering the domain of the shadows. We are seeking the Tengu. To understand these enigmatic beings, we must look not at the earth, but at the sky. We must travel back through the corridors of time to the middle of the 7th century, to a Japan that was still forming its identity through the marriage of local spirits and imported wisdom. The year was 637. The chronicles tell us that a strange light appeared in the heavens. It was a shooting star, a meteor of such brilliance and size that it seemed to tear the very fabric of the night. It moved with a terrifying roar, leaving a trail of fire that lingered in the eyes of all who saw it. In the imperial court, there was a priest of great learning named Bin. He looked upon this celestial fire and did not see a mere falling rock. He saw a messenger. He looked into the ancient texts of the mainland, the scrolls brought from China, and he whispered a name that would ripple through Japanese history: Tiangou, the celestial dog. In the Nihon Shoki, the second oldest book of classical Japanese history, this is the moment the name first touches the soil of the archipelago. But the Tengu we know today, the long-nosed guardian, the winged warrior of the peaks, began as something far more primal and frightening. In those ancient days, the sky was not a place of peace. It was a realm of omens and chaotic energy. The Chinese Tiangou, from which the Japanese Tengu takes its name, was a creature of the void. In the classic of mountains and seas, one of the most foundational texts of ancient Chinese geography and myth, the Tiangou was described as a beast that resembled a leashed cat or a canine, often associated with eclipses. It was the eater of the moon and the sun. It was a bringer of war and calamity. When the fire fell from the sky in 637, it was interpreted as the descent of this celestial predator into the Japanese mountains. Imagine the atmosphere of that era. The mountains were not seen as places for hiking or leisure. They were the terrifying borderlands between our world and the supernatural. They were the home of the kami, the spirits that governed the rain, the wind, and the harvest. To suggest that a celestial demon had taken residence in the high peaks was to fundamentally change the way people looked at the horizon. The Tengu was, in its earliest Japanese iteration, a spirit of the upper atmosphere, a being of wind and fire that resided where the air grew thin and the trees began to fail. However, a strange transformation began to occur as the myth moved from the imperial courts into the deep forests. The dog began to grow feathers. The canine associations of the Chinese original started to blur and merge with the indigenous bird demons of the Japanese wilds. This was the birth of the Kotengu, or the Karasu-tengu, the crow-tengu. To the ancient Japanese, the crow was a bird of deep significance. It was a messenger of the gods, yet it was also a scavenger. a bird associated with the battlefield and the transition between life and death. As we walk deeper into this narrative, think of the Karasu-tengu not as a man in a costume, but as a fusion of bird and human. They were depicted with the sharp, curved beaks of raptors, with great black wings that could create gales with a single flap, and with talons that could grip the sheerest cliff faces. They were the foot soldiers of the mountain, the manifestations of the wild's unpredictability. They were the spirits that resided in the dark canopies, watching the woodcutters and the monks with eyes that burned with a cold, predatory intelligence. Early Japanese folklore, specifically in the oral traditions that would eventually be captured in the Konjaku Monogatari-shu, the anthology of tales from the past, presents the Tengu as agents of confusion. They were not yet the dignified masters of the sword we find in later legends. They were mischievous, bordering on the malicious. They were known to abduct children, a phenomenon called Tengu Daoshi, where a person would vanish into the woods only to reappear days later in the high branches of a tree, dazed and speaking in tongues. They were the explanation for the unexplainable, the sudden disappearance of a hunter, the eerie lights on a ridge where no man could stand, the sound of a tree falling in the forest when no wood was being cut. There is a specific texture to these early myths. It is a texture of fear and reverence. The people of the Heian period lived in a world where the boundaries of reality were thin. A walk through a cedar grove at twilight was a journey through a corridor of spirits. The Tengu represented the danger of the untamed world. They were the guardians of the mountains, but their guardianship was not for the benefit of humanity. They guarded the silence. They guarded the sanctity of the peaks against the encroachment of civilization. As we explore the origins of the Tengu, we must also consider their relationship with the wind. In many primary sources, the Tengu are described as having the ability to manipulate the weather. They were the lords of the high air. If a sudden storm shattered a mountain village, it was said that a Tengu was displeased. If a fire broke out in a temple, it was often attributed to the Tengu bee. The Tengu fire, mysterious atmospheric lights that were seen dancing over the ridges. They were the personification of the violent, capricious power of nature. The evolution of the Tengu is also a reflection of Japan's religious history. As Buddhism began to take deep root in the mountains, the Tengu found a new target for their mischief. The early Buddhist texts of Japan, such as the Nihon Ryoiki, describe the mountains as the ideal place for ascetic practice. Rahipler, the monks, would go into the heights to seek enlightenment through solitude and hardship. To the Tengu, these monks were invaders. They were bringing a new order, a new law, into the ancient chaos of the peaks. This conflict between the ancient mountain spirits and the Buddhist practitioners is where the Tengu myth gains its greatest depth. The Tengu were said to use their powers of illusion to distract the monks. They would transform into beautiful women, or even into the likeness of the Buddha himself, to lure the practitioners away from their meditations. They would create sounds of phantom feasts or the clashing of swords to break the silence of the hermitage. They were the ultimate tests of the spirit. Think about the psychological weight of this. A monk, sitting alone in a cave on a freezing night, hears the flapping of great wings outside. He hears a voice that sounds like his mother or his teacher, calling him to come out. He knows it is a Tengu, but the illusion is so perfect, the atmospheric pressure of the mountain so heavy, that his mind begins to fracture. This is the Tengu as the Ma, the demonic influence that hinders the path to enlightenment. Yet, even in these early, more frightening versions, there is a sense of curiosity. The Tengu were not just monsters to be killed. They were beings to be understood. They possessed a forbidden knowledge. They knew the secrets of the stars, the language of the birds, and the hidden paths that connected the physical world to the realms of the spirits. They were the bridge between the celestial and the terrestrial. As we continue our journey tonight, we will see how this bird-beaked demon began to change. We will see how the beak began to shorten, turning into the iconic long nose of the Daitengu. We will see how the chaotic spirit of the wind began to adopt the robes of the very monks it once persecuted. But for now, let us remain here, at the beginning. Let us listen to the sound of the wind through the pines, and imagine the first time a traveler looked up and saw a shadow against the moon. A shadow with wings and a human heart. A creature born of fire from the stars. The Tengu is a creature of layers. Each century added a new coat of feathers, a new weapon, a new philosophical meaning. But at its core, the Tengu remains the spirit of the mountain. It is the reminder that no matter how much we build, no matter how many lanterns we light, there will always be places where the wild retains its power. There will always be peaks where the air is too thin for our laws to hold. In the chronicles of the 10th and 11th centuries, the Tengu's presence becomes more organized. They are no longer just solitary hunters. They are part of a hidden society. They have hierarchies. They have kings. They have a culture that mirrors our own, yet remains fundamentally alien. This is the period when the Tengu becomes the mirror of humanity, a distorted reflection of our pride, our violence, and our quest for power. To understand the Tengu is to understand the Japanese relationship with the forest. It is a relationship of aware, the pathos of things, and yugen, the profound, mysterious grace. The Tengu is the guardian of yugen. It is the figure in the mist that tells us there is more to the world than what we can see. It is the whistle in the dark that tells us we are not alone. As the fires of the 7th century cooled and the memory of the shooting star faded into legend, the Tengu took root in the Japanese imagination. They became the architects of the supernatural. Every strange occurrence, every mountain mystery, was a thread in the Tengu's web. They were the explanation for why the world was not always logical, why the spirits were not always kind, and why the mountain was always, always watching. Now, let us move forward. The mist is clearing slightly, revealing a path that leads to the great monasteries of the Middle Ages. The Tengu are waiting there, dressed in the robes of pilgrims, carrying the fans of feathers that can move the world. The transition from the celestial dog to the mountain monk is about to begin. But before we reach those heights, let us reflect on the silence that the Tengu protects, the silence that we have come to share. The early depictions in the Konjaku Monogatari often highlight the physical strangeness of these beings. They were described as having a shimmering quality, as if they were made of light and shadow rather than flesh and bone. This ethereal nature allowed them to possess people, a condition known as Tengu Tsuki. A person possessed by a Tengu would exhibit incredible strength, or perhaps the ability to recite scriptures they had never studied, often with a mocking, arrogant tone. The Tengu was the embodiment of pride, the mana that the Buddhist texts warned against. In the Buddhist worldview, pride was one of the greatest obstacles to liberation. The Tengu were said to be the reincarnations of monks who had gained great knowledge and power, but had failed to let go of their ego. They were fallen practitioners who were trapped in a middle realm, too powerful to be mere ghosts, but too arrogant to become kami or reach nirvana. This gives the Tengu a tragic quality. They are seekers who lost their way. They are masters of the mountain who are also prisoners of their own brilliance. Imagine a mountain monk or a yamabushi who has spent decades in the wilderness. He can walk on fire, he can stop his heart, he can command the spirits. But in his heart, he thinks, I am the greatest. I am more powerful than the gods. In that moment of supreme pride, the myth says, he is already becoming a Tengu. When he dies, he will not find peace. He will return to the peaks, his nose growing long with his vanity, his robes turning into wings, his staff becoming a weapon of war. This connection between the monk and the monster is unique to the Japanese tradition. It blends the fear of the supernatural with a profound moral lesson. The Tengu is the warning that knowledge without humility is a trap. It is the story of the mind turning into a cage. As we look up at the mountain ridges tonight, we see the silhouettes of those who sought the truth and found only themselves. The Daitengu, the great Tengu, emerged from this concept. These were the high-ranking spirits, the ones who commanded the legions of bird-beaked Karasu-tengu. The Daitengu was depicted as an elderly man with an unnaturally long, red nose. This nose was not just a physical trait. It was a symbol of his history as a man of pride. He wore the small black cap and the pom-pommed sash of the yamabushi, carrying a fan made of 7 or 9 feathers, usually from a bird of prey. With this fan, he could control the winds, create illusions, and even heal the sick. The duality of the Daitengu is fascinating. He could be a terrifying tormentor or a benevolent teacher. He was a master of the martial arts, a strategist of war, and a scholar of the occult. In the later medieval period, he would become the patron of the samurai, the one who taught the secret techniques that allowed a single warrior to defeat 100 men. But he was always unpredictable. He was the wind, sometimes a gentle breeze that brings the scent of blossoms, sometimes a typhoon that levels a province. In the primary sources of the 12th century, such as the Heike Monogatari, the tale of the Heike, the Tengu are seen as political actors. They were thought to influence the rise and fall of clans. They were the ones who whispered in the ears of emperors and generals, pushing them toward their destiny or their doom. The Tengu was no longer just a mountain spirit. It was a force of history. It was the manifestation of the chaotic energy that governed the fate of Japan. Consider the role of the mountains in the Heian and Kamakura periods. They were the spiritual bastions of the nation. Mount Hiei, Mount Koya, Mount Kurama. These were not just geographical features. They were the lungs of the Japanese spirit. The Tengu were the masters of these bastions. To control the mountain was to control the flow of spiritual energy to the capital. The Tengu were the silent partners in the dance of power. As we rest here in the foothills, let us think about the visual evolution of the Tengu, from the celestial dog to the bird demon to the long-nosed monk. It is a journey of humanization. The monster became more like us, so that it could better reflect our flaws. The beak became a nose, the claws became hands, the animalistic roar became a human voice. But the wings remained. The wings are the constant. They represent the freedom of the spirit, the ability to transcend the mundane world, and the refusal to be bound by the gravity of human society. The Tengu's wings are often described as being made of iron feathers. They were not soft or delicate. They were heavy, metallic, and sharp as swords. When a Tengu took flight, it was not a graceful soaring. It was a violent eruption. The sound of their wings was like the clashing of shields. This militarization of the Tengu's body reflects the turbulent times of the Sengoku period, where war was the constant state of existence. The Tengu became the ultimate soldier, a being whose very body was a weapon. Yet, despite their association with war and pride, the Tengu never lost their connection to the sacred. In many rural areas, the Tengu was seen as a protector of the local kami. They were the messengers of the mountain gods, the ones who enforced the taboos of the forest. If a hunter killed too many deer, or if a villager cut down a sacred tree, it was the Tengu who delivered the punishment. They were the ecological conscience of ancient Japan. This role as protectors of the natural order gives the Tengu a nobility that balances their more demonic traits. They are the enforcers of the balance. They remind us that the earth does not belong to us. We are merely guests in its more ancient spaces. The Tengu is the host of the mountain, and his hospitality has strict, often lethal, conditions. Tonight, as the moon hangs high over the ridges, imagine the Tengu Council. Imagine the great Tengu of the 8 major mountains of Japan gathering on a secret peak. They sit in a circle, their long noses pointing toward the center, their fans resting on their knees. They speak of the changes in the world below, the new religions, the new wars, the new technologies. They watch us with a mixture of amusement and concern. To them, we are the ones who are dazed and speaking in tongues. We are the ones who have forgotten the paths. The primary texts tell us that the Tengu are particularly active during the transitions of the seasons. At the equinoxes, when the boundary between light and dark is equal, the Tengu's power is at its peak. This is when the mountain breathes. If you stand on a ridge during the autumn equinox and you feel a sudden warm gust of wind that smells of dry leaves and ozone, that is the breath of a Tengu. It is a reminder that the world is turning, and the old masters of the air are still watching the clock of the stars. As we prepare to climb higher in our next section, let us take one last look at the origins. The fire from the sky, the celestial dog, the bird demon. These are the foundations of the myth. They are the roots of the cedar tree. Without the fear of the 7th century, we could not have the wisdom of the 14th. The Tengu is a creature that grew out of the darkness of the unknown and moved toward the light of human understanding, only to find that the light itself created deeper shadows. The transition from the Karasu-tengu to the Daitengu is not just a change in appearance, it is a change in philosophy. It is the movement from instinct to intellect, from the predator to the teacher. But the predator is always there, hidden under the silk robes of the monk. The beak is always there, waiting to emerge from the shadow of the long nose. The Tengu is the union of the wild and the civilized, the animal and the divine. Stay with me as the path grows steeper. We are leaving the era of omens and moving into the era of the Dharma. The monks are waiting in their mountain huts, and the Tengu are waiting in the trees above them. The battle for the soul of the mountain is about to begin. It is a battle of illusions, of magic, and of the ultimate test of human pride. Listen closely to the rustle of the leaves. The shadows are moving. The great Tengu is calling. In the silence between the gusts of wind, we can hear the echoes of the ancient chants. The mountains of Japan are not silent. They are filled with the voices of those who came before. The Tengu is the keeper of those voices. Every whistle, every crack of a branch, every sudden silence is a word in the Tengu's language. Tonight, we are learning to listen. We are learning to see the world not as a resource, but as a mystery. The first rays of the dawn of the Middle Ages are beginning to touch the highest peaks. The red-beaked demons are retreating into the deep caves, and the long-nosed masters are stepping out onto the balconies of the clouds. The era of the warrior monk is dawning, and the Tengu will be its shadow. Let us follow that shadow. Let us see where the wings of the mountain will take us. As we conclude this first chapter of our saga, remember that the Tengu is not a fixed point. It is a process. It is the process of the wild becoming mind, and the mind remembering the wild. It is the story of Japan itself, a land of exquisite order, built on a foundation of ancient, volcanic chaos. The Tengu is the guardian of that chaos. He is the one who makes sure we never forget the fire from the stars. Rest now for a moment in the foothills of history. The journey ahead is long, and the air will only get thinner. But the Tengu will guide us, or perhaps he will lead us astray. In the world of the mountain, both are the same path. Both lead to the truth. Let the storm begin. The ascent continues. As we climb higher, the trees huddle closer together, their ancient roots gripping the damp stones like the gnarled fingers of a giant. The air here is thinner, colder, and filled with a strange, heavy stillness that seems to press against the ears. We have left the era of celestial omens behind and entered a time of spiritual warfare. This is the era when the Tengu stopped being mere monsters of the wind and became something far more complex, the shadow of the Buddha's light. To understand this transition, we must look at the mountains not just as physical heights, but as spiritual fortresses. In the medieval period, Japan was a landscape of sacred peaks: Mount Hiei, Mount Koya, Mount Kurama. These were the centers of the Buddhist world. They were the places where thousands of monks retreated to practice the Dharma, to chant the sutras, and to seek the cessation of suffering. But in the eyes of the Tengu, these mountains were occupied territory. The arrival of Buddhism was an invasion of an older, wilder order. In the Buddhist cosmology that permeated Japan, there are 6 realms of existence: the realms of gods, humans, asuras, animals, hungry ghosts, and hells. But the Tengu presented a problem. They did not fit neatly into these categories. They were too powerful for the lower realms, yet too prideful and violent for the higher ones. This led to the creation of a unique concept: the Tengu-do, or the Tengu realm. It was described as a path of madness, a sideways realm for those who possessed great spiritual knowledge, but lacked the humility to use it rightly. Think of the tragedy of the fallen monk. This is the heart of the medieval Tengu myth. Imagine a man who has spent 50 years in a mountain monastery. He has mastered the complex mudras. He can recite the most esoteric sutras by heart, and he has gained the respect of his peers. But beneath his robes, a poison is brewing. The poison of pride, mana. He begins to believe that he is superior to his teachers, that his magic is greater than the Dharma itself. When such a man dies, the legends say, he does not go to the Pure Land. He returns to the mountain as a Daitengu. His long nose is the physical manifestation of his vanity. His wings are the manifestation of his desire to rise above others. He wears the robes of a monk because he still considers himself one, yet he is now an enemy of the faith he once served. This transformation turned the Tengu into the ultimate psychological mirror. They were the personification of the ego's ability to corrupt even the most sacred of paths. They were the Ma, the demonic hindrances that every practitioner feared. The primary texts of the 12th and 13th centuries, such as the Konjaku Monogatari-shu, are filled with accounts of this spiritual friction. These stories are not just fables, they are atmospheric warnings. One of the most famous tales involves a high-ranking monk of Mount Hiei who was sitting in deep meditation during a storm. Suddenly, the air inside his hut began to glow with a golden light. A magnificent pagoda appeared in the mist outside, and the voice of the Buddha himself seemed to call to him, promising him supreme enlightenment. The monk, overwhelmed by what he thought was a divine visitation, prepared to bow, but he paused. He noticed a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in the golden light. He began to chant a powerful protection mantra, the Dharani of the unshakable. As the words left his lips, the illusion began to fracture. The golden pagoda dissolved into a heap of rotten wood and dry leaves. The voice of the Buddha turned into a harsh, mocking cackle, and there, perched on a branch above, was a Tengu, its black wings trembling with laughter. It had nearly succeeded in luring a master into a trap of his own spiritual ambition. This theme of illusion is central to the Tengu's role as the enemy of the Dharma. They were masters of Geho, or heretical magic. They did not just attack with claws, they attacked the mind. They would create phantom banquets for starving ascetics, or terrifying visions of hell for those whose faith was wavering. They were the ultimate tests of the spirit. If a monk's heart was pure, the Tengu's illusions would shatter like glass. If his heart held even a shred of greed or vanity, he would be lost in the Tengu's maze. The mountains became battlegrounds of the unseen. The Enryakuji Monastery on Mount Hiei was the most powerful religious institution in Japan, yet its history is inseparable from its struggle with the Tengu. The monks built shrines to the mountain kami to appease them, but the Tengu remained the unpredictable factor. They were blamed for the sudden madness of young acolytes, for the disappearance of sacred scrolls, and for the fires that periodically gutted the wooden halls. They were the invisible people who lived in the cracks of the sacred architecture. But we must ask, why did the Tengu choose this path? Why were they so obsessed with the monks? In the narrative of the mountain, the Tengu represents the wild, unformatted power of nature. Buddhism, with its rituals, its hierarchies, and its focus on transcending the physical world, was seen as a force of domestication. The Tengu's rebellion was a rebellion of the wild soul against the cage of doctrine. They mocked the monks not out of pure evil, but because they saw the monks as hypocrites who sought to control a world they did not truly understand. This led to a fascinating phenomenon known as Tengu Tsuki, or Tengu possession. In the medieval period, if a person began to speak in a strange, archaic dialect, or if they displayed an unnatural knowledge of war and philosophy, they were said to be possessed by a Tengu. Unlike the possession of a fox or a ghost, Tengu Tsuki was intellectual. The victim would argue with high priests, exposing their flaws and mocking their lack of true insight. The Tengu used the human voice to speak the truths that the society was too polite or too fearful to acknowledge. Imagine a village square where a young girl, normally quiet and submissive, suddenly stands up and begins to recite the most complex military strategies of the mainland. She speaks with the voice of an old general, her eyes burning with a cold, red light. She mocks the local lord for his cowardice, and the local priest for his hidden greed. The villagers tremble, for they know they are not listening to a girl. They are listening to the mountain. This was the Tengu as the social critic, the voice from the wilderness that shattered the illusions of the civilized world. The visual identity of the Tengu also solidified during this period, merging with the image of the Yamabushi, the mountain ascetics. The Yamabushi were practitioners of Shugendo, a syncretic religion that blended Buddhism, Shinto, and ancient shamanism. They lived in the mountains, practiced extreme austerities under waterfalls, and were said to possess magical powers. The Tengu began to be depicted wearing the exact same gear, the token, a small black lacquer cap worn on the forehead, the suzukake, a tasseled sash, and the yuigasa, a 6 pom-pommed vest representing the 6 Buddhist virtues. This mimicry is profound. By wearing the clothes of the Yamabushi, the Tengu claimed to be the true practitioners of the mountain. They were the masters of the heights, and the human Yamabushi were merely their apprentices, or their victims. It was said that a Yamabushi who successfully completed his training would gain the respect of the Tengu, and might even be taught their secret magic. But a Yamabushi who failed, or who practiced for the sake of fame, would be abducted and turned into a Tengu himself. This is the origin of the Tengu Daoshi stories that became so prevalent in the Uji Shui Monogatari. These stories often follow a similar atmospheric pattern. A monk is walking alone at dusk. He hears the sound of many voices laughing and talking in a nearby grove. He investigates, thinking he has found a group of pilgrims. Instead, he finds a clearing filled with Tengu in the robes of monks, feasting on illusions. They invite him to join them. If he joins, he vanishes from the world of men. He becomes a phantom traveler, caught between the clouds and the earth, forever practicing a twisted version of the faith he once loved. The Tengu's relationship with the Dharma was not just one of simple opposition. It was a symbiotic struggle. The Tengu needed the monks to test their pride, and the monks needed the Tengu to test their faith. In some rare accounts, the Tengu are even seen as protectors of the Dharma, but in their own violent, eccentric way. There are stories of Tengu appearing to protect a scroll or a temple from thieves, not because they cared for the religion, but because the temple was part of the mountain's sanctity. As the medieval period progressed, the hierarchy of the Tengu became more defined. At the top were the Daitengu, the great masters like Sojobo of Mount Kurama or Tarobo of Mount Atago. These were beings of immense power and wisdom, often described as having long, snowy beards and eyes that could see through the layers of the world. Beneath them were the Karasu-tengu, the bird-beaked servants who handled the physical tasks, the abductions, the battles, and the creation of storms. This structure mirrored the feudal society of Japan, showing how the Tengu myth adapted to the culture of the people. The atmosphere of these myths is always one of twilight. The Tengu do not belong to the bright sun of the day, where everything is clear and categorized. They belong to the komorebi, the light that filters through the leaves, creating patches of shadow and gold. They belong to the yureidoki, the hour of ghosts, when the mountains begin to breathe. To encounter a Tengu was to enter a space where the rules of logic no longer applied. A cave that looked small from the outside might contain a vast, echoing palace inside. A path that seemed to lead down might lead to the highest peak. This mastery over space and time is a recurring theme in the primary Buddhist sources. The Tengu were said to be able to travel thousands of miles in a single breath. They could bring news from the capital to the farthest provinces before the fastest messenger had even saddled his horse. This made them figures of both fear and utility. Generals and lords would sometimes try to seek the counsel of a Tengu, offering sacrifices of rice and wine in exchange for knowledge of the future or the movements of their enemies. But the price for such knowledge was always the soul. To deal with a Tengu was to walk on the edge of a blade. They were famous for their back-handed gifts. A Tengu might give a warrior a sword that could never be defeated, but that sword would eventually demand the blood of the warrior's own kin. Or they might teach a monk a secret mantra that could cure any disease, but the use of the mantra would slowly turn the monk's heart to stone. They were the personification of the danger of shortcutting the spiritual path. In the 13th century text, the Genpei Josuiki, the Tengu are even linked to the great civil wars that tore Japan apart. It was said that the spirits of those who died with great resentment, especially emperors and high officials, would transform into Tengu to seek revenge on the world. The most terrifying example is the Emperor Sutoku. After losing a power struggle and being exiled, he reportedly cut his tongue and used his own blood to write a curse, vowing to become a great demon of Japan. Legend says he transformed into a Tengu king, his hair growing white and his nails becoming talons, ruling over the peaks and sending storms and plagues to the capital. This connection between the Tengu and the spirits of the dead added a new layer of dread to the myth. They were no longer just nature spirits or fallen monks. They were the architects of national calamity. Every earthquake, every famine, and every lost battle was seen as the work of the Tengu Council, orchestrating the fall of those who had become too arrogant in their power. The Tengu became the enforcers of a cosmic humility, striking down anyone, be they monk, samurai, or emperor, who forgot their place in the grand design. As we linger here in the shadow of the medieval temples, think about the sound of the Tengu Bayashi. It is a phenomenon reported for centuries, the sound of phantom flutes and drums echoing through the mountain valleys. Travelers would follow the music, hoping to find a festival or a village, only to find themselves lost in a labyrinth of mist and stone. The music was the siren song of the mountain, the Tengu's way of reminding us that our senses are easily fooled. The Buddhist transformation of the Tengu is a story of integration. The foreign religion tried to categorize the local spirits as demons, but the spirits responded by adopting the religion's own symbols and flaws. The result was a figure that was uniquely Japanese, a demon that was also a priest, a monster that was also a scholar. The Tengu is the reminder that the shadow is always the same shape as the light. In the deep caves of Mount Kurama, it is said that the great Sojobo still sits on his throne of ancient cedar. He is surrounded by thousands of bird-beaked servants who sharpen their iron feathers and practice their swordplay. He watches the smoke rising from the cities below, a small smile on his face. He knows that as long as there is pride in the human heart, his realm will continue to grow. He knows that every monk who seeks power instead of peace is a future citizen of the Tengu-do. As the centuries turned and the medieval period gave way to the era of the warriors, the Tengu's role shifted once again. The enemy of the Dharma began to take an interest in the way of the sword. The spiritual battle moved from the meditation mat to the training hall, but the lessons remained the same. Whether you were fighting an illusion in your mind or a blade in the hand of an enemy, the Tengu was the one who demanded absolute presence. Let us listen to the rustle of the robes in the wind. Is it a monk passing by on his way to a shrine? Or is it a Tengu descending from the ridge to test a traveler's soul? In the mountains of Japan, you can never be sure. The boundary between the practitioner and the predator is as thin as the edge of a leaf. The Tengu is the one who walks that boundary, forever trapped between his brilliance and his pride, a winged guardian of the path that leads both to wisdom and to madness. The primary texts of the Kamakura period, like the Heike Monogatari, describe the Tengu as being obsessed with the clashing of iron. They loved the drama of the battlefield. They saw war as the ultimate manifestation of human vanity, the perfect stage for their influence. They would often appear on the eve of a great battle, disguised as wandering priests or strange mountain men, offering cryptic advice that would lead to a bloody victory or a tragic defeat. They were the gamblers of the spirit world, betting on the pride of men. As we conclude this chapter of the Tengu's Buddhist transformation, reflect on the image of the long-nosed master in his red and gold robes. He is a figure of terrifying beauty. He represents the danger of knowing too much and feeling too little. He is the guardian of the mountains, but he is also a prisoner of his own wings. He reminds us that the higher you fly, the more dangerous the fall. The mist is shifting again. The sound of the flutes is fading, replaced by the sharp, rhythmic clashing of wooden swords. We are leaving the era of the monastery and entering the era of the dojo. The Tengu are putting down their sutras and picking up their blades. They are about to become the teachers of the greatest warriors Japan has ever known. But the price of their lessons is still the same. The mountain is waiting. The air is thick with the scent of ozone and iron. Let us follow the path down into the hidden valleys where the Sojobo teaches the secrets of the sword. Let us see how the bird-beaked demon became the patron of the samurai. The storm is not over. It is just changing direction. Close your eyes once more. Can you hear the sound of the wings? It is closer now. The Tengu are no longer just watching from the ridges. They are walking beside us, their iron feathers catching the moonlight. They are the shadows of our own ambition, the winged echoes of our own pride, and they have much to teach us if we have the courage to listen. In the silence of the Tengu-do, there is a profound truth. The truth that the greatest enemy is not the monster in the dark, but the ego in the light. The Tengu is the guardian of that truth. He is the one who forces us to face ourselves, one illusion at any time. And as the dawn of the warrior era breaks over the horizon, we will see just how far the Tengu's influence can reach. Stay with the mountain. Stay with the silence. The journey is only beginning, and the heights are still far off. But the wings of the Tengu are strong, and they can carry us to the very edge of the world, if we are willing to let go of the gravity of our own vanity. The path is clear. The Master is waiting. Let us move forward into the heart of the storm. The trail narrows now, turning into a precarious staircase of stone and moss that winds around the sheer face of the mountain. Here, the canopy of ancient cedars is so thick that the moonlight only survives as silver splinters on the forest floor. We are deep within the inner sanctum of the peaks, where the hierarchy of the shadows becomes clear. In the world of the Tengu, power is not just felt, it is seen. It is seen in the curve of a beak, the length of a nose, and the sharp, rhythmic clashing of iron feathers in the darkness. To understand the society of the Tengu, we must first recognize the two faces of the mountain. The first is the Kotengu, or, more commonly, the Karasu-tengu. These are the bird-headed ones, the messengers and soldiers of the high ridges. In the earliest scrolls, such as the Konjaku Monogatari, they are depicted with the dark, iridescent plumage of crows or the terrifying eyes of mountain hawks. They possess sharp, curved beaks that can shatter bone and talons that can grip the wind itself. They are the primal energy of the heights, the foot soldiers of the supernatural world. Imagine standing in a clearing at midnight and hearing the sound of 1,000 wings unfolding at once. That is the sound of the Karasu-tengu. They are social creatures, moving in flocks that mirror the organized chaos of nature. While the great Tengu may sit in solitary contemplation, the Karasu-tengu are the ones who patrol the borders, who deliver the punishments to those who violate the mountain's taboos, and who practice the arts of war until their movements become a blur of shadow and steel. But above them, sitting on thrones of gnarled wood or standing on the highest precipices, are the Daitengu. These are the great Tengu, the masters of the mountain. As we discussed earlier, their transition from avian monsters to long-nosed humanoids represents the integration of human pride into the spirit of the wild. The Daitengu are the generals, the scholars, and the kings. Their long, red noses are not just anatomical oddities. They are the marks of their status as fallen masters. They have traded the beak of the bird for the face of a man, yet they have kept the wings and the claws that remind us of their true origin. The relationship between the Karasu-tengu and the Daitengu is one of absolute hierarchy. In the medieval military texts and the tales of the Genpei Seisuiki, the Karasu-tengu are described as being fiercely loyal to their masters. They serve as scouts, as bodyguards, and as practitioners of a secret martial tradition that predates human history. When we speak of the Tengu as masters of war, we are speaking of a tradition that flows from the Daitengu's mind through the Karasu-tengu's wings. To look upon a Tengu is to look upon a Yamabushi. This is one of the most striking and atmospheric elements of the myth. The Yamabushi were the mountain sleepers, practitioners of Shugendo, who sought spiritual power through extreme physical trials. They wore a specific uniform that became the permanent costume of the Tengu. Let us examine this attire closely, for every thread and every knot holds a meaning that explains the Tengu's nature. First, there is the token. It is the small black lacquer cap worn on the forehead, tied with a thin cord. To the human Yamabushi, the token represented a vessel of wisdom, or sometimes a cup for drinking water in the high peaks. But on the head of a Tengu, it takes on a more arrogant quality. It is a crown of secret knowledge. It represents the closed mind of the fallen monk, the intellectual brilliance that became a cage of pride. Then there is the Yuigesa, the sash adorned with 6 large pom-poms. These pom-poms represent the 6 virtues of the Buddhist path: generosity, morality, patience, energy, meditation, and wisdom. For the Tengu, wearing the Yuigesa is an act of supreme irony. They wear the symbols of virtues they have failed to achieve, turning the sacred vestments into a mockery of the faith. The sounds of the Yamabushi also became the sounds of the Tengu. The horagai, the great conch shell trumpet, was used by mountain monks to communicate across valleys and to banish evil spirits. In the legends, when a traveler hears the deep, mournful drone of a conch shell echoing through the mist, it is often a sign that a Tengu is approaching. The sound is meant to paralyze the heart, a sonic manifestation of the mountain's overwhelming presence. Then there is the shakujo, the metal-topped staff with jingling rings. Originally used by monks to warn small animals of their approach so as not to step on them, the shakujo in the hands of a Tengu becomes a weapon of rhythm and distraction. The jingling of the rings is the soundtrack to their illusions, a hypnotic metal song that lures the unwary into the deep woods. This aesthetic fusion of the monk and the monster created a figure that was both familiar and terrifying. The Tengu was the distorted reflection of the highest human aspirations. As we walk past the hidden shrines tonight, imagine a group of these figures, some bird-headed, some long-nosed, all dressed in the tattered but dignified robes of the Yamabushi, gathering to practice the arts of the sword. The connection between the Tengu and the martial arts is perhaps the most enduring part of their legacy. In the traditional schools of Japanese Koryu Budo, the Tengu are often cited as the original sources of secret techniques. They were the masters of kenjutsu, swordplay, sojutsu, spear fighting, and naginata jutsu. They did not fight like men. They used the terrain, the wind, and the gravity of the mountain. They fought with a fluid, unpredictable grace that made a single warrior seem like a dozen. The primary texts, such as the Gikeki, which tells the story of the hero Minamoto no Yoshitsune, provide a vivid description of these training sessions. Legend says that as a boy, Yoshitsune was sent to the monastery of Mount Kurama. He was small, frail, and fueled by a burning desire for revenge against the Taira clan who had destroyed his family. Every night, while the monks slept, the young boy would slip out into the cedar groves of the Shoyogadani Valley. There, he met the king of the Tengu, the great Sojobo. Imagine the scene: a small human boy standing in a circle of ancient trees, surrounded by dozens of Karasu-tengu, with their wings folded like black cloaks. In the center sits Sojobo, his long white beard flowing over his chest, his red face illuminated by the flickering light of the Tengu bee. The great Tengu does not use a sword of steel. He uses a fan of feathers or a simple branch of cedar. He moves with a speed that defies the human eye, parrying the boy's strikes with a flick of his wrist. The lessons were not just about how to hold a blade. They were about the heiho, the strategy of the spirit. The Tengu taught the boy how to see with the skin, how to sense the movement of the air before a strike was even launched. They taught him how to move through the forest without snapping a twig, and how to use the shadows as armor. This was the birth of the Tengu-ge, the Tengu arts. These techniques were said to be so powerful and so secret that they could only be passed down in the dead of night, far from the eyes of civilization. This relationship between the Tengu and the warrior reflects the Japanese concept of musha shugyo, the warrior's pilgrimage. To become a master, one had to leave the comfort of the city and face the spirits of the wild. The Tengu was the ultimate instructor because he was a master of the ego. To defeat a Tengu in a duel, a warrior had to first defeat his own fear and his own pride. Only then would the secret paths of the sword be revealed. The atmosphere of these training grounds is one of intense discipline and supernatural energy. The Karasu-tengu were said to practice by jumping between the branches of the highest trees, engaging in aerial duels that looked like a dance of shadows. They would use their wings to create sudden gusts of wind to unbalance their opponents. They would vanish into the mist and reappear from the ground. This ghostly style of combat is what many believe influenced the early development of the ninja, or shinobi, who also operated in the shadows of the mountains and used the tools of the yamabushi to hide their movements. Consider the role of the feather fan, the uchiwa, in these myths. The Daitengu is almost always depicted holding a fan made of 7, 9, or 11 feathers. In the esoteric traditions, this fan is a weapon of mass destruction. A single flap can summon a gale that uproots forests. 2 flaps can create a whirlwind that levels a castle. 3 flaps can move the very clouds. But in the context of martial arts, the fan is a tool of misdirection. It represents the ability to control the opponent's perception. To fight a Tengu is to fight the wind. You can feel its power, you can see the damage it does, but you can never quite catch it in your hand. The Karasu-tengu, being more physical, often carried the kongo-zue, a heavy iron staff, or the tachi, the long sword of the early medieval period. Their movements were described as asynchronous. They would strike before the breath was finished, moving in the gaps between the heartbeats of their enemies. This predatory rhythm is what made them so terrifying on the battlefield. When the chronicles speak of the Haika warriors being hounded by spirits in the mountains, they are describing the psychological terror of fighting the Karasu-tengu. As we move through the forest, let us reflect on the hierarchy again. At the very top of the system are the 8 great Tengu of Japan. These are the celestial generals who rule over the most sacred mountains. There is Tarobo of Mount Atago, who protects the capital of Kyoto from fire. There is Buzenbo of Mount Hiko in Kyushu, a master of the southern winds. There is Jirobo of the Hira Mountains, a fierce rival of the monks of Mount Hi. And of course, there is Sojobo of Mount Kurama, the teacher of heroes. These 8 great Tengu were not just local spirits. They were regional powers, with thousands of Karasu-tengu under their command. This organization suggests that the Tengu were seen as a parallel civilization. They had their own laws, their own councils, and their own wars. In some accounts, the Tengu of different mountains would go to war with each other, their battles manifesting as massive storms or volcanic eruptions. The sound of thunder was sometimes interpreted as the clashing of Tengu armies in the clouds, their iron feathers striking each other with the force of falling stars. The Yamabushi aesthetic served as a bridge between this alien society and our own. By dressing as monks, the Tengu claimed a space in the religious landscape of Japan. They were the dark side of Shugendo. While the human Yamabushi sought to become one with the universe, the Tengu were the ones who had achieved the power, but had become intoxicated by it. This makes the Yamabushi Tengu a figure of tragic enlightenment. He knows the truth, but he cannot find peace. This brings us to the concept of mana, or gaman, the pride and endurance of the spirit. The Tengu is the master of gaman. He can endure the freezing cold of the peaks, the hunger of the long winters, and the isolation of the heights. But this endurance is fueled by his pride. He survives because he refuses to submit to anyone, not even the Buddha. This makes the Tengu the ultimate symbol of the individualist in a society that valued harmony and collective submission. He is the one who says, "I am," even when the universe says, "You are nothing." The primary sources in the Uji Shui Monogatari often highlight the Tengu's love for challenges. They would often approach human masters of various arts, not just war, but also music, poetry, and Go, and challenge them to a contest. If the human won, the Tengu would reward them with supernatural skill. If the human lost, they would be taken to the mountain to serve as a lackey. These stories show the Tengu as the ultimate gatekeepers of excellence. They did not tolerate mediocrity. To earn the respect of a Tengu, one had to be the best in the world. Imagine a master of the lute, the biwa, sitting on the shore of a mountain lake at twilight. He begins to play, and suddenly he notices a figure sitting on a nearby rock. It is a Karasu-tengu, its beak slightly open, its eyes closed in appreciation of the music. The Tengu does not attack. It listens. And when the music is finished, it might offer a single, cryptic piece of advice that changes the musician's art forever. This is the Tengu as the muse of the wild, the one who brings the chaotic beauty of nature into the structured world of human art. But we must never forget the danger. The master of war is also a master of cruelty. The Tengu's training sessions were often lethal for those who were not strong enough. They would throw their students off cliffs to see if they could learn to fly, or force them to fight phantom armies until they collapsed from exhaustion. The Tengu's love for humanity was always tempered by their contempt for human weakness. They were like the mountains themselves, beautiful to look at, but indifferent to whether you lived or died on their slopes. The Yamabushi connection also gave the Tengu a role in the health of the community. Because they were seen as masters of the mountain's spiritual energy, they were often invoked in rituals to cure diseases or to bring rain. The Tengu Mai, or Tengu dance, is still performed in many festivals across Japan. In these dances, a person dressed as a Daitengu with a long red mask and a fan leads a procession, clearing the path of evil spirits. This shows the transition of the Tengu from a demonic enemy to a protective kami, a process that took centuries of negotiation between the people and the spirits. As we conclude this chapter on the Masters of War, let us listen to the silence of the cedar groves one more time. Somewhere in the darkness above us, a Karasu-tengu is sharpening its talons. Somewhere on a hidden ridge, a Daitengu is unfolding a fan of 7 feathers, preparing to change the direction of the wind. They are the guardians of the old ways, the teachers of the sword, and the shadows of the monk. They remind us that the path to mastery is always uphill. They remind us that to gain power, one must be willing to face the wild, both in the world and in ourselves. But they also warn us, do not become so enamored with the view from the top that you forget the ground beneath your feet. For the Tengu is a creature of flight, but his heart is still made of the mountain's cold stone. The mist is growing thicker now, and the sound of the jingling rings of the shakujo is getting louder. We are moving toward the era of the great legends, where the Tengu's influence on history becomes undeniable. The story of Yoshitsune was just the beginning. The wings of the mountain are ready to carry us into the heart of the civil wars, into the secrets of the ninja, and into the final evolution of the long-nosed king. Stay close to the path. The Karasu-tengu are watching from the branches, and their eyes are bright with the fire of the stars. The great Tengu is waiting at the end of the trail, and he has a question for us. A question about pride, about power, and about the price of wisdom. Let us find the courage to answer. The mountain is deep, and the night is far from over. Think of the sound of a wooden sword striking a cedar trunk. That is the heartbeat of the mountain. That is the rhythm of the Tengu's world. In that sound, there is no past and no future. There is only the presence of the master and the student, the predator and the prey. Tonight, we are all students of the wind. We are all followers of the shadow. Let the lessons continue. The moon is a pale sickle hanging over the crooked spine of Mount Kurama, casting long, skeletal shadows that dance upon the forest floor. We are moving deeper into the legend now, leaving behind the general hierarchy to witness a singular, world-changing encounter. This is the valley of Shoyogadani, a place where the trees are so ancient they seem to breathe, and where the silence is a physical weight. Here, the history of Japan was rewritten not by armies, but by a boy and a ghost. To understand the relationship between the Tengu and the samurai, we must speak of Ushiwakamaru, the boy who would become Minamoto no Yoshitsune. His story begins in the bitter cold of political exile. The Minamoto clan had been crushed by the Taira, their leaders executed, their power shattered. Ushiwakamaru was sent to the monastery of Kurama-dera, intended to live a life of quiet prayer, his identity hidden, his potential neutralized. But the boy had the blood of warriors in his veins, and the mountain recognized his hunger. Every night, when the temple bells had faded, and the monks were deep in their dreams, Ushiwakamaru would steal away. He would follow a path known only to the creatures of the dark, climbing higher and higher until the air smelled of ancient ozone and the trees whispered in a language he was beginning to understand. He was seeking the sovereign of the valley. He was seeking Sojobo. In the primary text of the Gikeki, Sojobo is described as a figure of staggering presence. He is the king of the Tengu of Kurama, a being who has existed for thousands of years. Imagine him sitting on a throne of gnarled cedar roots, his hair a mane of snowy white that flows down to his waist, his face a deep, weathered red, and his eyes burning with the cold light of the stars. He wears the tattered robes of a high priest, but his fan of 7 eagle feathers is held with the grip of a master swordsman. Around him, the Karasu-tengu watch from the branches, their black wings folded, their sharp beaks gleaming in the dark. The training of Yoshitsune was not a simple matter of drills and forms. It was an initiation into the supernatural. Sojobo did not teach him how to strike a target. He taught him how to become the strike. The lessons were brutal and relentless. The Karasu-tengu would swarm the boy, moving with an asynchronous speed that blurred the senses. They attacked from the trees, from the shadows, from the ground. They used the wind to unbalance him, and illusions to confuse his eyes. Consider the atmospheric intensity of these nightly duels. The sound of a wooden sword striking an iron feather, the sharp gasp of a boy pushed to the edge of his endurance, the rhythmic chanting of the Tengu in the background. Sojobo would watch from his throne, his silence more demanding than any shout. He taught the boy the art of shukuchi, the ability to compress space, making a dozen steps into one. He taught him the Tengu Tobikiri, the leap that defied gravity, allowing a warrior to strike from the air as if he had wings of his own. But the most profound lessons were those of the spirit. In the philosophical heart of the Tengu-ge, the sword is not a weapon of death, but a tool of presence. To fight a Tengu, one cannot rely on the mind. The mind is slow. It hesitates. It fears. One must fight with mushin, the state of no mind. Yoshitsune was taught to empty himself until he was like the mountain wind, invisible, unstoppable, and indifferent. He was taught to sense the intent of his enemy before the blade was even drawn. This is the heiho of the peaks, a strategy that transcends muscle and bone. The Gekeki tells us that as the years passed, the frail boy was transformed into a creature of lightning. His movements became so fast that the monks who occasionally caught a glimpse of him thought they were seeing a ghost or a forest spirit. He had learned the secrets of the mountain, the paths that led through the layers of reality. He had earned the respect of the Karasu-tengu, who now sparred with him as equals. And finally, he earned the blessing of Sojobo. When Yoshitsune finally left Mount Kurama to reclaim his family's honor, he carried the mountain with him. At the Battle of Dan no Ura, when the Minamoto and Taira fleets clashed on the churning waves, Yoshitsune's prowess was described in terms that mirrored his training. He was seen leaping between the boats, his feet barely touching the gunwales, his blade moving with a supernatural grace that terrified his enemies. The chronicles say he moved like a bird, a direct reference to the Karasu-tengu, who had been his only companions for so many years. This legendary encounter between the hero and the Tengu king established the Tengu as the patron spirits of the martial arts. Across Japan, other warriors sought their own sojobo. In the provinces of the east near Mount Takao and Mount Izuna, different clans claimed that their founders had also been trained by the winged masters. The Izuna Gongen, a fusions of a local kami, a Buddhist deity, and a tengu, became a major object of worship for the samurai. These warriors would wear small amulets of tengu masks inside their helmets, believing that the spirit of the mountain would guide their hands in the heat of battle. The atmosphere of samurai honor was deeply intertwined with these mountain myths. The Tengu represented the ideal warrior, one who was skilled, detached, and connected to the primal forces of nature. But they also served as a warning. Just as the Tengu were fallen monks who had succumbed to pride, the samurai were always at risk of becoming monsters of their own ambition. The way of the warrior, Bushido, was a constant struggle to balance the violence of the sword with the humility of the spirit. The Tengu were the guardians of that balance, ready to teach those who were worthy and to destroy those who were arrogant. Let us look deeper into the esoteric side of this training. In the Shugendo traditions, the Tengu were associated with the Kujikiri, the 9-handed seals of power. These were finger gestures accompanied by mantras, used to focus the mind and command the unseen energies of the world. It was said that the Tengu taught Yoshitsune how to use these seals to vanish from sight, or to paralyze an opponent with a single word. This connection to the shinobi or ninja arts is undeniable. The ninja, who often operated out of the same mountain ranges like Iga and Koka, viewed the Tengu as their ancestral masters. They saw the Tengu's ability to use the environment, to create illusions, and to strike from the shadows as the ultimate expression of their craft. The visual of the samurai training under a waterfall, or in a lonely mountain cave, is a direct echo of the Tengu myth. They were seeking the Tengu Sho, the transmission of the mountain's spirit. This was not something that could be written in a scroll. It had to be felt in the cold of the night and the sting of the spray. It was a physical and spiritual osmosis. The warrior was trying to shed his humanity and become, for a moment, a being of wind and iron. Consider the role of the bokken, the wooden training sword, in these legends. In the hands of a human, it is a tool for practice. In the hands of a Tengu, it is as lethal as any steel. There are stories of Tengu defeating entire squads of armed men using only a branch of a pine tree. This was meant to demonstrate the superiority of spirit over material. The Tengu taught that the blade is merely an extension of the soul. If the soul is sharp, the weapon does not matter. This philosophy became the bedrock of many Koryu schools, where the goal was to reach a level of mastery where one's hands become swords. The relationship between Sojobo and Yoshitsune also highlights a rare theme in Tengu mythology, the theme of mentorship. Despite their reputation for malice and mischief, the Tengu could be profoundly loyal teachers to those they deemed exceptional. Sojobo saw in the young exile a vessel for a specific kind of justice. He was not just teaching him how to kill, he was teaching him how to end a war. This gave the Tengu a role as architects of destiny. They were the silent partners in the shaping of the Japanese nation, intervening at crucial moments to ensure that the right spirit prevailed. As we move through the history of these encounters, we find other names. Miyamoto Musashi, perhaps the most famous swordsman of all, is often linked to the Tengu in later folklore and art. While Musashi's own writings, like the Book of Five Rings, are grounded in practical observation, the popular imagination saw his genius as something supernatural. Prints from the Edo period often show Musashi sparring with Tengu in the mountains, suggesting that his no-design style of combat was a direct gift from the long-nosed masters. The Tengu became a convenient explanation for any talent that exceeded human comprehension. But what of the honor? In the samurai code, honor was everything. To lose honor was to lose the right to exist. The Tengu, however, operated on a different scale of morality. They were demons by definition, yet they possessed a code of their own. They valued strength, intelligence, and a specific kind of mountain integrity. They did not care for the laws of the shogunate or the etiquette of the court. They cared for the truth of the moment. This made them wild saints, figures who could be relied upon to speak the truth even when it was inconvenient or dangerous. Imagine a samurai who has committed a crime of passion, fleeing into the mountains to escape execution. He finds himself in a grove where the air is thick with the scent of incense and old blood. A Karasu-tengu steps from the shadows. It does not arrest him. It asks him, "Why did you strike?" The samurai, facing a being that can see through his heart, cannot lie. In that moment of absolute honesty, the Tengu might offer him a choice: return to face his punishment with dignity, or stay in the mountains and forget his name. This was the Tengu as the judge of the wilds, the one who stripped away the masks of society to reveal the soul beneath. The connection to the Yamabushi remains crucial here. The samurai who sought the Tengu were essentially becoming secular Yamabushi. They were adopting the hardships of the mountain to gain the power of the blade. The Izuna Ho, a secret ritual associated with the Tengu of Mount Izuna, was said to allow a warrior to summon a Kitsune Tengu, a fox Tengu, to ride upon his shoulder in battle, granting him invulnerability. These esoteric beliefs show how deeply the supernatural was integrated into the practical reality of medieval warfare. The sword was a physical object, but its edge was sharpened by the spirits. As the Sengoku period, the age of the country at war, drew to a close, the role of the Tengu as teachers began to fade into the realm of nostalgia. The unification of Japan under the Tokugawa shogunate brought a new kind of order. The wild mountains were mapped, the samurai became bureaucrats, and the way of the sword became a ceremonial art rather than a survival skill. But the Tengu did not disappear. They became the hidden masters, the guardians of the tradition. It was said that the greatest masters of the Edo period still traveled to the mountains in secret to receive the final wordless transmission from the Tengu kings. The atmosphere of these legends is one of longing, a longing for a time when the world was bigger, more dangerous, and more magical. The story of Yoshitsune and Sojobo is the archetypal expression of that longing. It is the story of the underdog who gains the power of the gods to strike down the giants. It is the story of the mountain choosing its champion. Even today, if you visit the Shoyogadani Valley on Mount Kurama, you will find a small shrine dedicated to the place where Yoshitsune practiced his swordplay. People leave offerings of wooden swords and red fans, hoping to catch a shred of that ancient energy. Let us pause for a moment and listen to the wind through the cedars of Kurama. Can you hear the clashing of the blades? Can you hear the dry, raspy laughter of Sojobo? He is still there, sitting on his throne of roots, watching the world change. He has seen the rise and fall of clans, the birth of modern cities, the fading of the old ways. But to him, it is all just a passing storm. The mountain remains. The sword remains. The honor remains. The Tengu's legacy in the martial arts is not just about the techniques. It is about the kokoro, the heart. They taught that to be a warrior is to be a servant of the truth. It is to move with the clarity of a hawk and the weight of a mountain. It is to be humble in the face of nature and fierce in the face of injustice. This is the samurai Tengu ideal, a fusion of the human and the demonic that created some of the most enduring stories in Japanese culture. In our next section, we will move away from the training halls and into the heart of the mountains themselves. we will explore the daoshi, the mysterious abductions, and the rituals that the common people used to protect themselves from the winged masters. We will see the Tengu not as teachers of heroes, but as the unpredictable lords of the landscape, the ones who could make a person vanish with a single flap of a fan. The mist is shifting again, revealing the red gates of the mountain shrines. The sound of the shakujo rings out, calling the spirits to gather. The great Tengu of the 8 mountains are preparing for a council, and we are invited to listen. But remember, in the presence of the Tengu, one must always be mindful of one's pride. The sovereign of the valley is watching, and his eyes see everything. Stay with the silence of Kurama. Let the image of the boy and the king linger in your mind. It is a reminder that greatness is not given. It is forged in the darkness, under the watchful eyes of the shadows. The lessons of the sword are the lessons of the soul, and the soul of the mountain is long-nosed, winged, and infinitely wise. The path continues upward. The air is getting colder, and the secrets are getting deeper. Let us follow the shadow of the wings as they soar over the ridges of the past. The Tengu is calling, and his voice is the sound of the world waking up. We have much more to see, and the night is still our companion. The ascent grows steeper now, and the forest begins to hold its breath. We are leaving the training halls of the heroes behind and entering the world of the common folk, the woodcutters, the charcoal burners, and the villagers who lived in the long, dark shadow of the peaks. For them, the Tengu was not just a legendary master of the sword. He was a daily reality, a neighbor whose mood governed the safety of the harvest and the life of anyone who dared to step off the beaten path. In this high wilderness, the boundary between reverence and terror is as thin as a mountain mist. Listen to the sounds of the mountain as the light begins to fail. Do you hear that? A sudden, booming laughter that echoes from a ridge where no human could stand. The locals call it Tengu Warai, the Tengu's laugh. It is a sound that can strip the courage from a man's heart, for it is the sound of an intelligence that finds our struggles amusing. Or perhaps you hear the Tengu Daoshi, the thunderous crash of a massive cedar tree falling nearby, shaking the very earth beneath your feet. Yet, when you rush to the spot the next morning, you find every tree standing tall, untouched by any axe or storm. These are the acoustic signatures of the mountain lords, the ways they remind us that we are merely guests in their domain. The most terrifying of these signatures, however, is the silence that precedes a kamikakushi, being spirited away. In the folklore of the Edo period and the medieval chronicles of the Konjaku Monogatari-shu, the Tengu were the primary architects of human disappearances. A child playing on the edge of a village, a monk walking between temples, a hunter trailing a deer. One moment they are there, and the next they are gone. There is no struggle, no cry for help, just an empty space where a person used to be. This is the Tengu Daoshi in its human form, the abduction into the hidden world. The primary texts describe these victims returning days, months, or even years later, often found in impossible places. They are discovered perched on the highest branches of a sacred pine, or wandering dazed in a distant province they could not have reached on foot. When they speak, their words are a tangle of celestial secrets and mountain madness. They have been to the outyards, the hidden palaces of the Daitengu, and the human world no longer fits them. They are the Tengu Tsuki, those touched by the wing, and their souls remain forever caught in the mist. One of the most famous tales of this kind is the story of the Tengu's magic cloak, or Tengu no Kakuremino. It is a story that exists in many variations across the archipelago, but the atmospheric core remains the same. Imagine a clever boy or a desperate gambler who encounters a Tengu in a lonely grove. The Tengu possesses a straw cloak that renders the wearer invisible. Through a game of riddles or a clever trade involving a hollow bamboo that the human pretends can see into the heavens, the human gains the cloak. He uses it to play tricks, to steal from the rich, and to mock the local authorities. But the cloak is a borrowed power. In the older, more somber versions of the myth, the human's greed eventually leads to his undoing. The Tengu, who allowed himself to be tricked as a test of the human's character, eventually reclaims the cloak, often leaving the human exposed and humiliated at the most dangerous moment. This reflects the deep-seated belief that while we might borrow the magic of the mountains, we can never truly own it. The Tengu are the accountants of the supernatural. Every gift they give must eventually be balanced by a price. To live near such unpredictable beings, the people developed complex systems of rituals and appeasement. This is the birth of the Tengu cults that still define the spiritual landscape of mountains like Mount Takao and Mount Izuna. At the Yakuo-in temple on Mount Takao, the Tengu are not seen as demons, but as Kenzoku, the divine messengers of the deity Izuna Daigongen. Here, the relationship is one of mutual protection. The Tengu guard the temple and the forest, and the people offer their respect and their prayers. If you walk the trails of Mount Takao today, you will encounter the octopus cedar. Legend says that centuries ago, the Tengu were building a path to the summit, but a massive cedar tree with sprawling roots blocked their way. The Tengu prepared to uproot it, but the tree, recognizing the power of the mountain lords, spent the night curling its roots upward and inward, out of the path's way, looking like the tentacles of an octopus. The villagers saw this as a sign of the Tengu's authority over the natural world. They began to worship the tree, leaving offerings of sake and rice to the spirits that commanded even the ancient timbers. In the rural regions of Nagano, the cult of Izuna Gongen took an even more esoteric turn. Izuna Gongen is a fascinating figure, a fusion of a Buddhist bodhisattva, a Shinto kami, and a Daitengu. He is often depicted as a bird-headed warrior riding upon a white fox, holding a sword and a rope. This deity became the patron of the Izuna Tsukai, sorcerers who claimed to use the power of the Tengu to control fox familiars and perform acts of divination. The Tengu here is the master of the Geho, the outside law magic that could heal a sick child or strike down a corrupt official. The rituals of these cults were atmospheric and intense. The Goma fire ritual, performed in the cold mountain air, involved the burning of thousands of wooden sticks while monks chanted mantras to invoke the presence of the Tengu kings. The smoke was seen as a bridge between the worlds, a way for the prayers of the people to reach the high ridges. Woodcutters, before taking an axe to a tree, would leave small offerings of mochi, rice cakes, or salt, whispering apologies to the Tengu of the grove. To cut a tree without permission was to invite the Tengu bee, the mysterious mountain fires that could consume a village in a single night. The Tengu bee is a phenomenon recorded in many Edo period texts like the Sanshu Kidan. These were not ordinary fires. They were described as globes of flickering, bluish light that would drift over the ridges or dance upon the surface of mountain lakes. To see the Tengu was a sign that the spirits were on the move, perhaps traveling to a council or conducting a ritual of their own. If the light stayed near a particular tree or shrine, it was a signal that the site was sacred and must not be disturbed. This was the landscape of the yokai, a world where every light and every shadow had a name and a purpose. As we move through these cults, consider the role of the Tengu as the guardian of the silence. In many Shinto traditions, the deep mountains are Iwakura, the dwelling places of the gods. The Tengu are the enforcers of the purity of these spaces. They punish those who are loud, those who are greedy, and those who treat the mountain with disrespect. There is a story from the Kii Peninsula of a group of travelers who mocked the local legends while camping in a high valley. That night, they were pelted with Tengu-tsubute, a rain of stones that came from nowhere, breaking their pots and terrifying their horses. No matter how far they ran, the stones followed them until they reached the village gates. This was the Tengu as the ecological conscience, the one who reminds us that the wild is not a playground. The hierarchy of these cults also mirrored the diversity of the Tengu themselves. While the Daitengu, like Tarobo of Mount Otago, were worshipped by the elites and the warriors for protection against fire and war, the smaller Kopa-tengu, or Konoha-tengu, were the ones the peasants dealt with. These were the leaf Tengu, lower-ranking spirits who were often seen as more mischievous than malicious. They were the ones who would steal a farmer's hat or lead a traveler in circles through the mist. To the common folk, the mountain was a living, breathing society, and the Tengu were its citizens. The atmosphere of a Tengu shrine is unique. Unlike the bright red torii gates of Inari or the grand halls of the sun goddess, Tengu shrines are often tucked away in the shadows, guarded by stone statues with long noses and fierce eyes. The air smells of damp moss and incense. There is a sense of being watched, not by a benevolent god, but by a stern master who is weighing your heart. People leave offerings of Tengu Geta, the one-toothed wooden sandals that the mountain spirits are said to wear. These sandals represent the ability to walk on the uneven paths of life with balance and strength. Think about the psychological impact of these beliefs on a mountain community. It created a world of profound respect for the environment. You did not hunt in the inner woods because that was the Tengu's garden. You did not speak loudly in the valleys because the Tengu Warai might answer you. You lived your life in a constant negotiation with the unseen. The Tengu was the embodiment of the mysterium tremendum, the overwhelming mystery that both attracts and terrifies. In the later Edo period, the Kamikakushi stories began to take on a more structural role in society. If a person wanted to escape an unhappy marriage or a crushing debt, they might vanish and later claim they had been taken by a Tengu. This shows how the myth provided a way for people to navigate the rigid structures of human society. The mountain was a place where the laws of the shogun did not apply, a place of ultimate freedom, but a freedom that came with the risk of losing one's mind. The primary sources in the Uji Shui Monogatari often frame these abductions as a form of spiritual discipline. A monk who is abducted by a Tengu is not just being kidnapped, he is being corrected. He is shown the vanity of his ways, forced to see the world from the perspective of the birds and the trees. When he returns, he is often a better monk, though he can never truly relate to other humans again. The Tengu is the crude teacher, the one who uses trauma and wonder to break the ego. Let us pause for a moment at the base of a sacred Shinboku tree, an ancient cedar wrapped in a Shimenawa rope. This tree is a doorway. The Tengu use these trees as their porches, sitting in the high branches to observe the world below. When the wind rustles the needles, it is the sound of their fans. When a cone falls, it is a message. The common people knew how to read these signs. They knew that a sudden drop in temperature meant a Daitengu was passing by. They knew that the smell of ozone meant a storm was being brewed in the high caves. The cult of the Tengu also merged with the worship of the Yama no Kami, the goddess of the mountain. In some traditions, the Tengu were the sons or the servants of the goddess. They were the masculine, active force that defended the feminine, fertile power of the earth. This connection ensured that the Tengu remained central to the agricultural cycle. Rituals were held at the start of the planting season to ask the Tengu to bring the rain down from the peaks, and at the harvest to thank them for the safety of the fields. As we move toward the modern era in our next section, we will see how these ancient fears and rituals began to transform into cultural celebration. The demon of the 7th century and the enemy of the 12th century would eventually become the mask of the festivals. But even in the bright lights of a modern Matsuri, the Tengu retains its edge. The long nose and the fierce eyes still command a respect that crosses the centuries. The mist is shifting again, revealing the lanterns of a village festival. The sound of the Tengu Bayashi is no longer a phantom music. It is being played by human hands. We are moving from the mystery of the high peaks to the legacy of the lowlands. But as we walk down the trail, remember the feeling of the silence. Remember the sound of the laugh that comes from nowhere. The mountain does not forget its lords, and the lords do not forget their people. The path is wider now, but the trees are still watching. The Karasu-tengu are still there, hidden in the shadows of the eaves. The great Tengu is still there, his fan ready to turn the wind. We are carrying the weight of the mountain with us as we head toward the final chapters of our saga. The stories of the spirited away are the echoes of our own desire to transcend the mundane, to find a world that is bigger and more magical than our own. Stay with the rhythm of the journey. The night is long, and the shadows have more to tell us. We have explored the origins, the wars, and the rituals. Now, we must see how the Tengu found its place in the heart of modern Japan, and what it means for us today. The wings are unfolding, and the sky is waiting. Let us follow the light of the Tengu bee as it leads us home. In the end, the Tengu is the bridge between the earth and the sky, the human and the wild. He is the reminder that even in our modern world, there are mysteries that cannot be explained, only respected. As we leave the sacred groves of Takao and Izuna, let the silence of the peaks linger in your heart. The mountain lords are watching, and their laughter is the music of the stars. As we begin our descent from the highest, most treacherous peaks, a subtle shift occurs in the atmosphere of the mountain. The air, once sharp with the scent of ozone and the threat of supernatural war, begins to soften. The jagged edges of the rocks are smoothed by a thick carpet of emerald moss, and the sunlight, though still filtered through the ancient canopy, feels a bit warmer on the skin. We are entering the transitional space of the Tengu, the era where the shadow of the demon began to blend with the light of the guardian. This is the period of the Edo era, a time of relative peace in Japan, where the winged lords of the mountains were redefined by the people who lived in their constant presence. To understand this transformation, we must look at the concept of kami. In the Shinto tradition, a kami is not necessarily a god in the Western sense, but a spirit, a force of nature, or an embodiment of a specific energy. A kami can be terrifying and destructive, or it can be benevolent and protective. For centuries, the Tengu was seen primarily in its destructive aragami aspect, the wild, untamed spirit of the storm and the heretical monk. But as the centuries of civil war ended and the nation stabilized under the Tokugawa shogunate, the relationship between humanity and the supernatural began to mature. The people began to see the Tengu not just as an enemy to be feared, but as a power to be harnessed and respected. The transition from a demonic entity to a protective deity was not a sudden event, but a slow, organic process of negotiation. Imagine a village at the base of Mount Takao. For generations, the villagers had told stories of children taken by the Tengu, of crops ruined by sudden mountain gales, and of strange lights dancing on the ridges. But they also noticed that the mountain remained fertile, that the water from the peaks was pure, and that the forest was filled with life. They began to realize that the Tengu were the enforcers of the mountain's health. They were the ones who ensured that the cycle of nature remained unbroken. The fear began to turn into a profound, ritualized respect. In the primary texts of the 18th and 19th centuries, such as the Sanshu Kidan, the Tengu is increasingly depicted as a guardian of order. This is the era when the Daitengu were elevated to the status of local deities. At the Yakuo-in temple, the Tengu became the guardians of the Izuna Daigongen, a powerful composite deity. The long-nosed Daitengu and the bird-beaked Karasu-tengu were no longer seen as obstacles to the faith, but as the Kenzoku, the divine servants, who protected the sacred grounds from fire, theft, and spiritual decay. They became the bouncers of the supernatural world, keeping the lesser, more malicious spirits at bay. One of the most significant roles the Tengu adopted during this period was the protector against fire. In the crowded wooden cities of the Edo period, like the capital itself, fire was the ultimate enemy. A single spark could level an entire district in hours. Because the Tengu were lords of the wind and masters of the mountain fires, it was believed they had the power to prevent such catastrophes. Shrines to the Tengu of Mount Atago were established throughout the cities, and people would hang charms of the red, long-nosed face above their doors to keep the fire demon away. The Tengu had moved from the wilderness into the heart of the civilization, standing watch over the very houses they might once have haunted. The atmosphere of this guardianship is beautifully captured in the ukiyo-e woodblock prints of the era. Artists like Katsushika Hokusai and Utagawa Kuniyoshi frequently depicted the Tengu. In these prints, the Tengu is often shown in a more dignified, almost aristocratic light. They are seen as protectors of heroes, as teachers of wisdom, and as majestic residents of the high peaks. The sharp, predatory edges of the earlier bird demons are replaced by a sense of ancient, weathered authority. The Tengu's gaze is still fierce, but it is the fierceness of a judge rather than a predator. Consider the role of the Tengu in the folklore of the woodcutters and charcoal burners during this time. These men lived their lives in the Satoyama, the borderland between the human world and the wild mountain. They developed a complex etiquette for interacting with the Tengu. Before felling a tree, they would offer prayers and small gifts of rice or salt. They believed that if they treated the forest with respect, the Tengu would protect them from accidents and guide them to the best timber. But if they were greedy or disrespectful, the Tengu would cause their axes to break or lead them into a ravine. This was the Tengu as the ecological manager, the one who enforced the sustainable use of the mountain's resources. This transition also changed the nature of the kamikakushi, the spirited away abductions. In the earlier medieval tales, being taken by a Tengu was a nightmare that often ended in madness or death. But in the Edo period folklore, these stories sometimes took on a more educational tone. There are accounts of young boys being taken to the mountains for a few days, only to return with the ability to predict the weather, or with an incredible talent for playing the flute. The Tengu was no longer just a kidnapper. He was a strict tutor who kidnapped his students for their own good. The mountain had become a school of the supernatural. The primary source, Tengu Meigiko, written in the late 18th century, provides a detailed taxonomy of these beings, reflecting the effort to categorize and understand them as part of the natural and spiritual order. The text lists the names of the great Daitengu who rule the various provinces, describing their individual temperaments and the specific ways they interact with the human population. This shows that by the end of the Edo period, the Tengu were integrated into the bureaucratic and religious structure of Japan. They were the spiritual governors of the wilderness, with a status that was almost official. The symbolic impact of the Tengu on Japanese identity is profound. They represent the spirit of the wild that persists even in a highly structured, urbanized society. The Tengu is the part of the Japanese soul that refuses to be tamed, the part that remains connected to the ancient, volcanic energy of the land. As the nation moved toward the modern era, the Tengu became a symbol of national strength and indigenous pride. They were the guardians of the true Japan that existed before the arrival of foreign influences. Think about the Tengu geta, the one-toothed wooden sandals worn by the Yamabushi and the Tengu. To walk in such sandals requires incredible balance and a strong core. For the people of the Edo period, these sandals became a metaphor for the Tengu's character. They represented the ability to stand tall on the most difficult terrain, to remain balanced in a world of constant change. The Tengu was the one who could walk where others stumbled. This was the guardian they looked to when life became overwhelming, the one who could offer the strength of the mountain to those who were worthy. The rituals of guardianship also became more public and festive during this period. Many of the Matsuri festivals we see today have their roots in this era. The Tengu Mai, or Tengu dance, became a staple of community celebrations. In these dances, a performer wearing a fierce red mask and flowing robes would lead a procession through the streets, using a fan to sweep away the bad luck and the spirits of disease. The Tengu had become a celebrity of the supernatural, a figure who brought excitement and a sense of divine protection to the village. But even as a guardian, the Tengu never lost his shadow. The shadow of the Tengu is the reminder that power is always dangerous. Even the most benevolent Daitengu could turn on a person if they sensed pride or deceit. This dual nature, light and shadow, is what makes the Tengu so compelling. They are not good in the simplistic sense. They are right. They are the enforcers of a cosmic law that is often harsh and indifferent to human feelings. They remind us that to live in harmony with the mountain, we must be willing to face our own shadows. The primary texts of the late Edo period, like the Shinsetsu Hyaku Monogatari, still contain stories that chill the blood. They speak of people who, despite the rituals and the charms, still vanished into the mist. They speak of strange, high-pitched whistles that sounded over the roofs of a village just before a tragedy struck. These stories served to keep the respect alive. Guardianship was not a guarantee of safety. It was a pact. And in any pact with the Tengu, the human had to uphold their end of the bargain. As we linger here in the foothills, watching the smoke rise from the distant villages, let us reflect on this shift. The Tengu had traveled from the stars as a celestial dog, transformed into a bird-beaked demon to fight the monks, and finally settled into the role of the long-nosed guardian of the peaks. Each stage of the myth reflects a different stage of human consciousness and its relationship with the wild. The guardian Tengu is the manifestation of our desire for a protector who is as powerful and as ancient as the earth itself. In the art of the 19th century, we see the Tengu interacting with other yokai and kami, forming a complex tapestry of the supernatural world. They are often seen in councils with the foxes of Inari or the water spirits known as kappa. This shows that the Tengu were not just isolated mountain spirits, but key players in a larger cosmic community. They were the diplomats of the wilderness, the ones who negotiated the boundaries between the various realms of existence. The atmosphere of a Tengu-guarded forest is one of Imi, the sacred taboo. It is a place where you feel the weight of an ancient law. When you walk through a grove of ancient cedars on Mount Takao today, you can still feel it. It is a sense that the trees are not just wood, but witnesses. The stone statues of the Tengu, their long noses pointing toward the horizon, are not just decorations. They are the sentinels of the silence. They are the ones who remind us that even in our modern, loud world, there are places where the old rules still apply. The transition to guardianship also allowed the Tengu to become a figure of humor and wit. In the Kyogen traditional comedies, the Tengu is often depicted as a slightly pompous figure, whose arrogance is his own undoing. This humanization allowed the people to relate to the Tengu on a more personal level. He was like the stern grandfather who was terrifying when angry, but could be charmed with a good story or a bowl of sake. This mix of fear, respect, and affection is what ensured the Tengu's survival into the modern age. Consider the Tengu's fan again. In the hands of a guardian, the fan is not just a weapon to create storms. It is a tool for cleansing. It is used to blow away the kegare, the spiritual pollution that accumulates in human life. When a priest at a Tengu shrine waves a fan over a supplicant, it is a symbolic act of the mountain wind blowing through the soul, leaving it fresh and clear. The Tengu has become the spiritual launderer of the nation, the one who helps us start again. As we prepare to enter the final chapter of our saga, let us take one last look at the shadows on the mountain. The sun is setting, and the red light of the dusk is reflecting off the stone faces of the Tengu statues. They look as if they are about to speak. Perhaps they are. Perhaps they are telling us that the world is changing once again, and that they are ready to change with it. The wings of the mountain are still strong, and they are still protecting the silence that we so desperately need. The transition to guardianship was the ultimate victory of the Tengu. By becoming the protectors of the people, they ensured that their name would never be forgotten. They moved from the fringes of history into its very heart. They became the winged echoes of the Japanese spirit, the ones who remind us that to be strong, we must be rooted in the earth and open to the sky. Stay with the mountain a little longer. The path to the modern world is just ahead, lit by the neon lights of the cities and the lanterns of the shrines. But even in the bright light of the future, the shadow of the long nose remains. The Tengu is still watching, still laughing, and still guarding the hidden paths that lead to the truth. We have seen the darkness, and we have seen the light. Now, we must see how they merge into the modern day. The journey is almost complete. The air is thick with the scent of incense and the sound of the evening bells. Let us follow the flight of the Karasu-tengu as they head toward the final horizon. The story of the mountain is our story, and the wings of the Tengu are our own desire for a world that is still filled with mystery and grace. In the silence of the transition, there is a profound peace. The peace of knowing that the guardian is on his rounds. The peace of knowing that the mountain is safe. And as we conclude this chapter, remember that the Tengu is not just a myth. He is a presence. He is the rustle of the leaves, the whistle in the dark, and the strength in our hearts. Let the guardianship continue. The night is beautiful, and the mountain is eternal. The journey is nearing its end, yet the mountain air feels as timeless as ever. We have traveled through the corridors of history, from the first celestial fire in the year 637 to the spiritual wars of the medieval monasteries and the discipline of the samurai training halls. We have seen the Tengu as a demon, an enemy, a teacher, and a guardian. Now, as the morning sun finally breaks over the modern horizon, illuminating the neon skylines of Tokyo and the quiet shrines of Kyoto alike, we find ourselves asking, where does the Tengu live today? The answer is not found in the museums or the dusty pages of ancient scrolls alone. It is found in the rhythm of the festivals, the breath of the martial arts practitioner, and the very soul of the Japanese landscape. To step into a modern Japanese matsuri is to step into a living mythology. The presence of the Tengu in these festivals is overwhelming. In the city of Kyoto, during the Gion Matsuri, one of the most famous festivals in the world, the Tengu-to, or Tengu mountain floats, are carried through the streets. These massive, intricately carved structures are topped with the long-nosed mask of the Daitengu, watching over the thousands of people who gather to celebrate. But the atmosphere here is not one of fear. It is one of joy and connection. The long nose of the Tengu, once a symbol of fallen pride, has become a symbol of vitality and spiritual protection. People reach out to touch the floats or buy small charms with the Tengu's face, seeking a shred of the mountain's power to carry through their modern lives. One of the most atmospheric celebrations occurs on Mount Kurama, the very place where Yoshitsune learned the secrets of the sword. The Kurama Fire Festival, held every October, is a primal display of the Tengu's association with fire and the wild. As darkness falls over the mountain, massive torches made of pine wood are lit, turning the slopes into a river of orange light. The sound of the drums and the chanting of the men carrying the torches echo through the valleys, creating a soundscape that feels identical to the legends we have discussed. In the flickering light of the flames, the wooden masks of the Tengu seen in the shrines seem to come to life. The eyes gleam and the red faces appear to sweat in the heat. This is the moment when the Tengu bee, the supernatural mountain fire, becomes a human celebration. It is a ritual of renewal, a way for the community to acknowledge that the lords of the peak are still watching, still demanding the same courage and endurance that they did 1,000 years ago. The legacy of the Tengu is also deeply embedded in the Budo, the martial ways of modern Japan. While the samurai as a social class may have faded into history during the 19th century, the techniques and philosophies they learned from the Tengu-ge have survived. In the dojos of Kendo, Aikido, and Karate-do, the concept of mushin, the state of no mind that the Tengu taught to Yoshitsune, remains the highest goal. A practitioner seeks to move without hesitation, to sense the movement of the universe before a strike is launched. Every time a student bows to the high seat of the dojo, they are acknowledging a lineage that stretches back to the cedar groves of Mount Kurama. The Tengu is the invisible sensei, the spirit of perfection that every warrior strives to reach but can never truly possess. He is the reminder that the ultimate battle is always against one's own ego. Consider the visual impact of the Tengu mask in modern art and media. While we avoid the fleeting trends of pop culture, it is essential to recognize how the icon itself has become a universal shorthand for the mysterious and the powerful. The red mask with the long nose is an image that resonates across the globe. It is used in architecture, in traditional theater like No and Kabuki, and in the designs of high-fashion designers who seek to capture the Yugen, the mysterious grace of old Japan. The mask is a bridge between the physical and the spiritual. When a No actor puts on the Tengu mask, they are not just performing. They are undergoing a ritual of possession. They move with the heavy, calculated steps of the mountain lord, their movements creating a silence in the audience that is as heavy as the mist on a ridge. The Tengu Geta, those one-toothed sandals, have also found a place in the modern world. They are often used by practitioners of traditional arts or by people seeking to improve their physical balance and focus. To wear them is to feel the gravity of the earth in a new way. It is a reminder that the path of the mountain is never flat, and that to walk it, one must be fully present in every step. This physical discipline is a form of secular shugendo, a way for modern people to connect with the hardships that the Yamabushi once embraced. The Tengu, in his silence, still encourages us to find our balance in a world that is constantly trying to knock us down. In the 20th century, the Tengu myth underwent a psychological reinterpretation. Scholars of folklore and psychology began to see the Tengu as an archetype of the human shadow. He represents the outsider, the part of us that belongs to the wild, the part that rebels against the constraints of society. The Tengu's pride is our own pride. His fallen state is our own failure to achieve the ideals we set for ourselves. But his resilience is also our resilience. By facing the myth of the Tengu, we are facing the complexities of our own nature. We are acknowledging that we are both the monk and the monster, both the scholar and the predator. This psychological depth is why the Tengu has not faded into obscurity like many other spirits. He is a part of the human condition. The atmosphere of the mountain shrines, such as Mount Takao near Tokyo, has become a place of refuge for millions of people. In the middle of the most advanced technological nation on Earth, people still travel to the cedar groves to stand before the statues of the Tengu. They leave offerings of sake and rice, and they ring the heavy bells to get the spirit's attention. Why? Because the Tengu represents a continuity that technology cannot provide. He is the link to a time when the world was filled with kami, when the wind was a voice and the mountain was a throne. He provides a sense of home in the deep sense, a connection to the land and its ancient memories. As we look at the geography of Japan, we see the 8 great Tengu mountains still standing as spiritual bastions. Mount Atago in the west, Mount Hiko in the south, Mount Izuna in the north. These are not just tourist destinations. They are the lungs of the nation's spirit. The preservation of these forests is, in a way, a tribute to the Tengu. Because the people believe the spirits dwell there, they protect the trees and the waters. The Tengu has become an accidental environmentalist, a guardian of the ecosystem, who uses ancient taboos to ensure that the modern world does not consume the entire wilderness. This is perhaps the most practical manifestation of his guardianship in the 21st century. The sounds of the mountain have also persisted. The Tengu Bayashi, the phantom music of the peaks, is still reported by hikers and mountain workers. Even in the age of satellites and digital recordings, there are moments when the wind catches a valley in a certain way, creating a sound that resembles a flute or a drum. For those who hear it, the modern world falls away. They are transported back to a time of wonder and fear. The music is the Tengu's way of saying, "I am still here. The paths are still open. The silence is still mine." It is a sound that evokes curiosity and a profound sense of peace. The story of the Tengu is a cycle of transformation, from the celestial dog that ate the moon to the bird demon that tormented monks, and finally to the red-faced king who teaches heroes and guards the forest. It is a story of integration. The Japanese spirit did not destroy the demon. It negotiated with it. It gave the demon a home, a uniform, and a purpose. This ability to absorb the other and turn it into a protector is one of the most beautiful aspects of Japanese mythology. The Tengu is the result of that long, centuries-old dialogue between the human and the supernatural. Tonight, as we conclude our deep dive into the complete life of the Tengu, think about the lessons we have gathered on the path. We have learned that pride is a cage, but it can also be the fuel for incredible endurance. We have learned that the wild is dangerous, but it is also the source of true wisdom. We have learned that honor is not something that is given by society, but something that is forged in the silence of the peaks. The Tengu is the guardian of these truths. He is the one who watches us from the shadows of the eaves, his fan ready to turn the wind. Imagine yourself now, standing at the very base of the mountain we have been climbing. The dawn is fully here, and the mist is lifting from the valleys. The sounds of the village are waking up, the distant hum of traffic, the call of a neighbor, the sound of a broom sweeping a porch. The world of the legends seems far away, but then you look up. You look at the high ridge where the cedars touch the clouds. For a split second, you see a flash of red among the green. You hear a sharp, resonant whistle that is not a bird and not the wind. You see a shadow with great black wings unfolding, catching the light of the new sun. The Tengu is taking flight. He is heading back to the inner sanctum, back to the hidden palaces where Sojobo sits on his throne of roots. He is taking the secrets of the night with him, but he is leaving a part of the mountain in your heart. You feel a sense of strength, a sense of balance, and a profound curiosity about the world around you. You realize that the mountain is not just a place on a map. It is a state of mind, and the Tengu is its eternal resident. The story of the Tengu is the story of the spirit's refusal to be small. It is the story of the desire to fly, to know, and to protect. As long as there are mountains in Japan, there will be Tengu. As long as there is wind through the pines, there will be the sound of their wings. They are the winged echoes of a nation's soul, the guardians of the mysterious grace that makes life worth living. Thank you for journeying with me through the 7 parts of this saga. From the fire of the 7th century to the rituals of the modern day, we have walked the path of the winged master together. If you found peace in the presence of the mountain and curiosity in the shadows of the Tengu, please leave a like and subscribe to Hearths of Myths. Your support helps us keep the ancient fires burning and the stories alive for generations to come. May your path be clear. May your spirit be as strong as the mountain cedar, and may you always have the courage to face your own shadow. Let the laughter of the Tengu be your music, and the silence of the peaks be your sanctuary. The world is full of mysteries, and we have only just begun to explore them. But for now, let the mountain rest. The air is still now, the light is bright, the journey is complete. But remember, whenever the wind catches you by surprise, or whenever you see a shadow move in the corner of your eye in the deep woods, it might just be a messenger from the high air. The great Tengu is still watching, and he is waiting for the next seeker to find the path. Sleep well in the safety of your home, but keep a window open to the sky. The wings are unfolding, and the story never truly ends. It only waits for the next twilight. Farewell, traveler of the myths. Farewell, and may the long-nosed master guide your steps home.